A man imported moths to make better silk, and somehow the result was forests getting eaten. That was not the plan. The plan was clean. Get stronger silk. Build a useful new industry. Tiny problem. Some moths escaped, and their descendants did not become beautiful fabric. They became leaf-eating chaos with wings in the family tree. This is the story of the spongy moth, formerly known as the gypsy moth, a fuzzy insect that looks harmless until enough caterpillars make a tree regret being a tree. And the strangest part is where it began. Not a secret lab, not a giant factory, but a backyard in Medford, Massachusetts. In the late 1860s, Étienne Léopold Trouvelot was living in Massachusetts. He was an artist, an astronomer, and an amateur insect enthusiast, which sounds like a man who might answer a normal problem with bugs. At the time, silk was valuable. Silkworms were useful, but they could be vulnerable to disease. So Trouvelot became interested in breeding a tougher silk-producing insect, a tiny living factory with legs. To do that, he brought moths from Europe. The goal was not to create a forest pest. The goal was better silk, a useful experiment. You can picture him looking at caterpillars and thinking, these little things could become an industry, which is exactly the kind of sentence that makes nature quietly open a window. Because the whole plan depended on one fragile assumption. The insects would stay contained. A spool of silk stays where you put it. A jar stays on a shelf. A notebook stays closed. A moth does not. A moth can escape. A caterpillar can crawl. Eggs can hide. And once a living experiment leaves the experiment, it becomes a population. According to the famous story, some of Trouvelot's moths escaped. Some versions say a storm damaged the enclosure, and some details have shifted over time. But the important part is clear enough. The moths got out. At first, nothing looked dramatic. That is what makes the backfire dangerous. If a machine explodes, everyone notices. If a few insects escape, people may just shrug. A moth on a tree does not look like the start of a forest problem. It looks like a small oops. But living mistakes do not need to look big. They only need to survive. And they survived. For years, the problem stayed quiet. Then, around a decade later, nearby trees began to suffer. Caterpillars were eating the leaves, not nibbling one cute little corner, defoliating. That means stripping leaves. In normal human language, the caterpillars were turning trees into sad sticks. Imagine waking up and looking outside. Yesterday, leafy shade. Today, branches like someone stole the tree's clothes. And under that tree? Caterpillars. Lots of them. Crawling on trunks, hanging from silk threads, crossing fences and sidewalks, moving like fuzzy consequences. This was the moment the plan changed shape. The original idea was moth makes silk. The real result was caterpillar eats tree, very different business model. Once the population was established, control became difficult. They could feed on many kinds of trees. Oak trees are especially favored, but many hardwoods can be attacked. Their egg masses could survive cold weather, and young caterpillars could ride the wind on silk threads. That is a terrible feature, a baby pest with a parachute. Picture it. A tiny caterpillar climbs up, lets out silk, catches the breeze, and floats away like the world's worst dandelion seed. One caterpillar escapes the yard, then another. A breeze arrives, then the map slowly fills with tiny chewing mouths. That is the core backfire. Humans wanted a stronger silk insect, but imported a leaf-eating machine. The useful trait was not the whole creature. That is the mistake. A caterpillar is not only silk potential, it is appetite, reproduction, movement, eggs stuck to surfaces, and larvae floating on wind. It is a tiny animal asking one question, can I eat this leaf? And if the answer is yes often enough, the forest has a problem. Spongy moth outbreaks can be intense. When populations rise, caterpillars can cover trees and strip them bare. A healthy tree may survive one defoliation, but repeated defoliation weakens trees. Add drought, disease, or other stress, and some trees can die. So the moth does not need to cut down a forest like a lumberjack. It weakens the forest by stealing its leaves again and again. A tree without leaves is not just ugly. Leaves are how the tree feeds itself. No leaves, less energy, less strength. That is how a small insect becomes a big problem. Not by being huge, by being many, and hungry, and patient. The first response was basically panic with tools. People scraped egg masses, burned, sprayed, trapped, searched, climbed, and tried almost everything humans could try against an insect that had already learned the neighborhood. But the problem kept spreading, because once an invasive insect becomes established, the question changes. You are no longer asking, can we stop the escape? You are asking, can we manage a population that is now part of the landscape? That second question is much worse. Over time, the spongy moth spread through much of the northeastern United States and into other regions. It became one of North America's major invasive forest pests, and officials still manage its spread today. That is how long a small experiment can last. A few escaped insects in the 1800s, and modern agencies still dealing with the consequences. The moth did not just escape Trouvelot's yard, it escaped his lifetime. And that is the quiet lesson. The experiment ends, the notebook closes, the person moves on, but the living thing keeps living. The caterpillar only cares about the leaf in front of it, and the next leaf, and the next. That is why the story is not really about one bad man with moths. The plan was not obviously evil. It was a human trying to make something useful. But he treated a living organism like a controllable tool. And living tools are the dangerous kind. A needle stays in a sewing kit. A loom stays in a room. A moth can leave. This is the wider pattern. Humans choose one trait, and reality delivers the rest of the package. Silk comes with appetite. Hardiness comes with survival. Productivity comes with spread. The thing you wanted comes attached to the thing you forgot to ask about. And because moths are small, the story feels extra strange. A rabbit invasion looks possible. A giant wetland rodent looks suspicious from the beginning. But a moth bumps into a lamp and loses. It does not look like a creature that can change forests. But that is the trick. You do not need to be powerful when you are numerous. You do not need to be big when the target is leaves. So if you draw this story as one clean cartoon, it starts with a hopeful man holding silk thread, then a small enclosure, then a moth slipping out, then caterpillars on leaves, then a street of bare trees. That is the backfire. The dream was silk. The result was forest management. The product became a pest. So the plan was simple. Import moths, breed stronger silk insects, build an industry. But the moths did not stay in the plan. They escaped. They bred. Their caterpillars climbed trees and ate leaves. And the insect brought in for silk became a reminder. Nature does not care what job title humans put on the cage. If you like this one, the next video is right here. Go watch that, and as always, let me know what you think down below. Thanks for watching, dummies. I'll see you in the next one.